So here's the first question. Could you talk a little bit about the history of LGBTQ activism? First of all, let's say what each of those letters stand for. L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, T is for transgender, and Q can either be for queer or questioning. The history of LGBTQ is not that long. I know when I was coming out, I was born in 1948. I was in high school. I was like 15, 16 in 1964, 65. There was no L, there was no BTQ. We had H for homosexual, but everyone knew gay. In terms of gay activism, if you think about it, like at Duke University, there used to be a Duke University gay club. UNC, everything was gay because gay seemed to cover everything you were. But as time went by, and I would have to say, the Stonewall riots happened in 1969. And with the Stonewall riots happening in New York City, gay was still the term that a lot of people use, but what seemed to happen is that more and more women were getting involved, and a lot of women didn't like the idea of just gay. And there was something unique about being women identified, and so the L word, lesbian, really became more of a, if you're going to say gay, you have to say it's the Gay and Lesbian Student Center. It's the Gay and Lesbian History Project. So at the same time, you had this group called the National Organization for Women. They were terrified about the idea that it would be so identified with lesbians that it was called like the Lavender Menace. If you're a member of now, we're not lesbian, don't identify. So a lot of women said, well, then why do I want to belong to an organization that doesn't want me? Because they don't want to be seen as someone who identifies as lesbian. So if anything, I knew it seemed to heighten up the desire, the need, almost the importance of self-identifying as a lesbian feminist, not running away from it. And the way we could almost track how we would add these letters is every time we had these big national marches. So the first one in 1979 was the National Gay March. The one that we had in '87 that we were involved with here in North Carolina as one of the organizers was the National Gay and Lesbian March. By the time 1993 came along, these are the big marches in Washington, then it was the National Gay, Lesbian, and Bi, not sexual, but Bi March, and then by the year 2000, they ended up adding the T. So every one of those letters, and the T was transgender. That was also very difficult too. But now, people say LGBT, you don't even think twice about it. It's almost been accepted mainstream. So I would say the history was maybe 30 years. So gay, then they added the L for lesbian, B for bisexual, T for transgender, and Q was tough. I'm now 64 years old. I don't like to use the word queer. That's just me. But the fact that you had a lot of people saying, well, what's wrong with the word queer? You know, you can just take a word that's been always known as very negative and kind of own it, appropriate it, you know, like the word dyke and, I don't know, whatever word you want to use. So queer became a lot of what people like to use. But also Q is for questioning. A lot of people not sure who they are, what they are. So that, in a nutshell, is how you got the letters. And here's the important thing. If you meet someone, and rather than you saying, well, she looks like a lesbian to me or whatever, here's the easiest way to take care of it. Ask the person, how do you self-identify? And that person gets to tell you exactly how they self-identify. So I moved in '82 to come here, into Durham, never been in North Carolina, to take a job with the War Resisters League that was against militarism. We have military bases not far from here, and we had issues around women in the military, just a real kind of big, broad-based kind of anti-war, social justice stuff. And I remember coming to Durham, and I looked around, and I said, well, where do the lesbians meet? Well, they meet at the Durham YWCA. And I said, I'm sorry, what did you say? And I looked at it, and I said, is this it? Well, I'm here 30 years later. Durham is one of the most amazing progressive towns I've ever lived in. It's inclusive, it has a long history of civil rights organizing, long history of labor organizing, long history of social justice organizing coming out of Duke University. And a lot of our lesbian activists came right out of Duke. And we formed this thing called TALF, Triangle Area Lesbian Feminist. And Duke had a lot to do with it, because students would graduate. Where would they go? They come here, or we go back and forth between the campuses. So for us, and as an out lesbian working for the Warrior Sisters League, there's tons of lesbians in this town, and because of it, there's such a long history of, actually more lesbians run Durham, if I can use that term, than gay people, gay men. So it's just, that's how it's always been. But now we have a growing bi, trans, queer, and also more also across class issue, and also across color. So it's very, very inclusive. So I already came here as a lesbian, but also as a lesbian social justice activist, so it just made sense just to keep doing it. But North Carolina is the home of Senator Jesse Helms. If you don't know who Jesse Helms is, all you need to do is think about the civil rights movement. He was one of the staunchest segregationists that ever walked the earth. He was the reason why we almost didn't get the Martin Luther King holiday. He was very anti-civil rights. Blacks should be staying in their place, they shouldn't get anything. And once the civil rights movement ended up getting all the wins that they had, who did he turn to next? The gay and lesbian community. So then he went after us as sort of like the, you know, we don't like gay and lesbians, and tried to, as a U.S. Senator, had a lot of power. But he's come and gone. Have either one of you ever heard of Jesse Helms? I hope you have. Please Google it. It's hard not to live in the state and not know who this man is. Anyway, but because of him, it made this wonderful coalition of people of color, because that's what we didn't like, women, that's what we didn't like and voted against, poor, environment, education. In other words, if you looked at his voting record and you wanted to know who would be in coalition with you, all you had to do was to see every vote that he had against what constituency of people, and that became what was then, in 1990, to this day, an incredibly great statewide, progressive, inclusive coalition dating back to 1990. So